Inflation is the rise in prices over time, which causes the value of money to go down. In simple terms, the same amount of money buys you less than it did before. That's why things that used to cost £10 might now cost £11 or £12. Your money doesn't stretch as far. Let's take a closer look. In 2010, the average price of an 800-gram sliced white loaf of bread in the UK was £1.20, and by 2024 it had risen to around £1.40. That doesn't seem huge. But if prices rise across everything, milk, petrol, train tickets, clothes, rent, it starts to add up. You might not notice it in one item, but across your whole budget, you feel the difference. The UK tracks inflation using something called the Consumer Prices Index, or CPI. It looks at the average price of a basket of hundreds of everyday goods and services. In 2022, for example, UK inflation peaked at over 11%, the highest in 40 years. That meant prices, on average, were over 11% higher than the year before. Extreme inflation, called hyperinflation, can cause prices to spiral out of control, though that's rare in countries like the UK. On the flip side, falling prices, called deflation, can also hurt the economy in other ways. What causes inflation? There's not just one reason. Sometimes it's supply problems. When energy prices rose after the war in Ukraine, heating your home became more expensive. And because fuel powers deliveries, factories and transport, prices for goods went up too. Sometimes it's demand. When the pandemic ended, people started spending more on travel, home upgrades, takeaways, but many businesses weren't ready. There weren't enough workers or supplies to meet the sudden demand. So prices rose. There's also wage inflation. If employers raise wages to attract workers, they often pass that cost on to customers. So a cafe that starts paying staff more might also raise the price of your lunch. Economists often categorize inflation into three main types. The first is cost-push inflation, which happens when the cost of essential goods, like energy or raw materials, goes up, causing prices across the economy to rise. The second type is demand-pull inflation, which occurs when consumer demand is very strong and pushes prices higher because supply can't keep up. Lastly, there's built-in inflation, where people expect prices and wages to keep rising, and those expectations end up reinforcing each other, creating a cycle of ongoing inflation. How does inflation affect you? Inflation ties in closely with interest rates. The Bank of England tries to keep inflation at about 2%, enough to keep the economy moving but not so high that people struggle. When inflation goes up too much, the bank usually raises interest rates to cool down spending. That can make loans and mortgages more expensive, but it also encourages saving, which helps slow inflation over time. But here's where it gets personal. Inflation affects you whether you think about it or not. Let's say you've got £2,000 saved in a basic account that pays 1% interest. But if inflation is running at 6%, your money is effectively shrinking. After 1 year, your £2,000 might feel more like £1,880 in terms of what it can buy. You haven't lost any pounds, but you've lost purchasing power. That's because of real interest rates. If your savings earn 1%, but prices are rising at 6%, your real interest rate is actually minus 5%. Your money is losing value in real terms. Inflation can also affect your income. Say you earn £30,000 a year, and you get a 2% pay rise. That sounds fair. But if inflation is 5%, you're still worse off, because prices are rising faster than your income. You can buy less with your pay than you could before, even though the number went up. Inflation doesn't just happen once, it builds over time. For example, with 4% inflation, prices double roughly every 18 years, meaning what costs £100 today could cost £200 in less than 2 decades. A 6% inflation rate doesn't just take 6% once, it compounds year after year. So over a decade, even moderate inflation can really shrink what your money can buy. Inflation can also affect borrowers. If you have a fixed rate loan and inflation rises, the real value of your repayments goes down. In other words, you're paying back the debt with money that's worth a bit less each year. Here's a more everyday example. In 2018, a litre of petrol in the UK cost around £1.25. In 2022, it hit nearly £2 per litre. That meant filling a 50-litre tank went from costing about £62 to nearly £100. If you drive to work every day, that's a major hit to your budget. And it didn't come from buying more or doing something wrong, it came from inflation. What can you do about it? You can't stop inflation, but you can try to protect your money from it. The first step is awareness. Knowing inflation exists and watching how fast it's rising helps you make better financial choices. For example, if you're choosing where to keep your savings, it's worth comparing interest rates. Is your money growing faster than inflation is eating into it? The second step is thinking long term. Saving is essential, but if your savings don't grow, they'll lose value over time. That's where investing comes in. It might sound intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. Over the long run, even simple investing approaches, like using a stocks and shares ISA to buy a mix of funds or shares, can help your money grow faster than inflation. You don't need thousands to start. Even putting in £25 a month is a good habit, and over time, consistent investing can help you stay ahead of inflation. To sum it all up, inflation is when prices rise and the value of your money falls. It affects everything, from your weekly shop to your savings account. You can't avoid it, but by learning how it works and planning for it, you can make smarter choices and protect your future. Understanding inflation isn't just about economic theory, it's about making sure the money you work hard to earn is keeping up with the rising cost of living, so that your savings and investments don't lose value over time. When you understand how inflation works, you can plan ahead, invest wisely, and protect your future purchasing power. Thanks for watching this video. Not sure where to go from here? You don't need another video, you need a plan. Grab the free 5-day series below and start investing with confidence. The link's right here on screen and in the description. Don't miss out.